Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Ron Evans with Ron Evans Realty, and the other day I recorded a YouTube short kind of going over a little bit very briefly about seller disclosures in real estate. And today I wanted to give a more in-depth look at seller disclosures in real estate. I do want to let everyone know that this is related to California. I do believe that a lot of what I talk about is very good practice if it's not the law where you're at. But I also know that a lot of other states have very, very similar rules and laws that we do here in California. And in any case, if you just disclose, you will eliminate so many issues for your clients. Well, let's get right in. So understanding seller disclosures in real estate, what you need to know. And again, this is based on my experience and what I know here in California. Are you planning to sell or buy a home? Have a client that's going to sell or buy a home? Then you need to know about seller disclosures, which is a very critical part about the real estate transaction process. In this video, I'm going to explain what seller disclosures are, why they matter, and what information they typically include. First of all, I'm going to define what the seller disclosures are and how they differ from a property inspection and other inspections. I'm then going to talk about why they're important for both buyers and sellers. So they're not just to protect the buyer, but they're good for sellers too. And I'm going to get into that and how they can affect the value of your property or the property you're trying to sell and help prevent any legal issues. That's what this is all about. Disclose. Stay out of jail, stay out of court, stay out of like the bad juju of selling and buying real estate. Then I'm going to go over some of the most common disclosures or the most common disclosures that sellers are required to make, such as defects or malfunctions in the home systems, any renovations that have been done, additions, and any other environmental hazards that might potentially be lingering. We're going to cover those kinds of things. We're going to cover legal requirements for seller disclosures. And I'm not going to talk about other states other than California, but you can Google it. What you can do is just Google in your state, how do our seller disclosure laws differ, or how are they different from California? And you'll get the differences from what I'm talking about. I would imagine, though, that 95% of what I talk about here, even if it's not the law, like I said, where you're at, it's a good best practice to follow. And then, we're going to give you I'm going to give you some tips on navigating the disclosure process, how to review your disclosures carefully, ask questions of your agent. And then if you're working with an agent or an attorney, how to kind of like just get through the whole process, because it can be pretty daunting for some people when they have to actually look at something on paper and fill it out. So let's get started. So first, let me talk a little bit about the difference between disclosures and things like property inspections, okay? First of all, a disclosure is something that you as the seller are letting everybody know what you already know to be true and factual about the property that you're selling. Whereas an inspection is you hiring somebody or the buyer hiring somebody to come in and just look for things that may or may not be wrong with the property. So an inspection may not find things that you disclose, but also an inspection may find things that you don't disclose. Does that make sense? You can always drop a question and a comment down below if at any time I say something that doesn't make sense, and I will get back to you. I'll comment back. So an inspection is something that the buyer has done or a seller does as a pre-inspection for listing their home, right? And you're paying someone to come and be like, okay, what are you going to find wrong with my house? A disclosure is you, the seller, going through some steps to let the buyer know what you already know to be true and factual about your home. Any material defects, anything that might affect the value of your property, you are going to voluntarily and truthfully let the buyer know. Now, I can tell you from my own personal experience, and you can probably talk to a lot of different agents out there, most of my transactions never encounter issues. The ones that do encounter issues, though, are almost typically around inspections and disclosures. And it has to do with the fact that the inspector comes in and finds things that weren't disclosed by the seller. And then the buyer is put on the defensive of, why didn't they disclose this? What else could they be hiding? And more often than not, it has been my case, what I've been involved in, my buyer will end up canceling the contract and looking for another home. Nobody wants that. I think it's pretty safe to say that agents on both sides of a deal want to do everything they can to mitigate any issues and help a deal stay together and be completed. But that's what happens. The seller may have or may not have intentionally omitted things from the disclosure, but the fact that it happened can throw some things into question for the buyer. And I'm going to give you guys a really good example right now. A couple of years ago, I had a client that was buying a home in Temecula, California. And we were on our second home that we were in escrow on with this particular buyer. The first time it canceled because there were things that there was just too much wrong with the home. Nothing that wasn't disclosed, just too much wrong with the home. And we couldn't come to an agreement on either repairing or fixing or offering her credit. That happens. It just happens. The second home, however, we're in on, the inspector is there, and I like to try to get the seller disclosures before we go into a property inspection so that we can kind of know things to look for, especially if they say they repaired things or they've done additions or whatever. Then I kind of know ahead of time to have my inspector take an extra look to make sure it's done correctly, and does he see any issues with it or whatnot. On this particular home, though, we were on the outside and we are behind the wall of the kitchen facing the exterior of the home, and there is quite an obvious stucco patch in the wall where the sink is. I have the disclosures, I'm looking at it. There's nothing noted of any repairs to the wall or in the kitchen, other than there was at one time that they did do they refaced cabinets and things like that on the inside, but there was nothing noted for the exterior of the home at all. So when I bring that up, turns out that, yep, they had a water leak at one point, and it was so bad in the wall that they had to have a huge section, about a 2-foot section of the drywall on the wall actually cut out and repaired and replaced. And it wasn't like the greatest job of stucco. That's how we were able to find it. It was very, very obviously there. So then, come to find out, there were probably 3 other items that they finally let us know that were done to the home, repaired, fixed, whatever, that were not on the seller disclosures. And that caused my client to be like, okay, hold on, we're about to spend $1 million here. I think we're going to bail. And I didn't blame him at that point, because I would have been questioning it as well. Was it intentionally done by the seller? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't like to ever think that anybody is intentionally trying to defraud or misrepresent. It's a very, very strong accusation to make. But sometimes I think people get caught up in a wild, hot real estate market on the buy side or on the sell side, and you lose attention to detail. So maybe it just didn't get caught. I don't know. But we moved on. But that was something that could have been very big. Maybe down the road, 2 or 3 years down the road, you have another leak there, and someone comes and says, hey, did you know you had a leak here or previously, and now it's worse, or it was never fixed right the first time. It can be very litigious then between the previous owner and the current owner when things aren't disclosed properly. So that's the big reason why I say disclose, disclose, disclose. And that's an example of something that can happen that isn't disclosed, but then the inspector finds it and it makes a deal fall apart, unfortunately. Now let's talk about the types of disclosures that are going to be required to be turned in and reviewed by the buyer. There are several, but there are 3 main ones that we're going to talk about today. One is called the Seller Property Questionnaire, SPQ for short, the Transfer Disclosure Statement, TDS for short, and the Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure, AVID for short. These are the three key ones that you're filling out, that you're answering questions, either the seller and or the agent, and it's being matched up. You're basically letting the buyer know, here's what we know about the property. So let's get started. I have my notes over on the right, so I apologize if I'm looking away. I'm not ignoring the video. I just have another screen over here that has all my notes. So let's talk about the seller property questionnaire and what it is for. So this is mainly where you as the client, as the seller, are now going to put down things like, do you know that there's a nuisance with a neighbor? Yes or no? There's a lot of questions, 4 pages. What material defects do you know on the property? Any matters affecting title of the property, like is there a lien? Is there a mechanic's lien? Do you owe somebody money and you have a judgment against you? Or do you have other people on a note that might have a cloud on title? Maybe someone passed away and you haven't got it all squared away yet on who's supposed to be responsible for selling it. A lot of those types of things. This is your opportunity to come clean and let everyone know what's going to go on so that we can get it corrected in escrow. But it's also going to ask about repairs and alterations. Okay. What have you done to the home in the last 12 months, 2 years? If it's before 1978, can you disclose if it had originally had lead-based paint or it's been covered up? Structural systems and appliances. This is your chance to say, hey, the dishwasher doesn't work, or the dishwasher had a leak, we haven't had it repaired, or the dishwasher was replaced. The microwave doesn't work. This is your chance to let everybody know everything. Have you had any disaster relief or insurance claims? Flooding from natural hazard or otherwise, right? Just in the home. Water related and mold issues. This is a really big one because sometimes people have issues with a flood, sink overflows, water pipe breaks, and they clean it up, but they don't realize that mold starts growing on the inside until later. They have someone come check it out. It may or may not meet certain thresholds for hazmat cleanup or whatever, but they think they get it all taken care of, and you don't see anything. Again, and now you're going to sell your home and you just had it fixed a little while ago, and you don't disclose it on here, and then like a year later your buyer is in the home and all of a sudden there's mold in a spot, and you come to find out there was a repair there and there was mold earlier because you had a leak and you didn't disclose it. So it's very important that even if it was years ago, you've lived in the home 10 years and 9 years ago you had a leak and you had mold remediated, put it on here, disclose it. Then you're going to have a chance to talk about your pets, your animals, your pests. Okay. If you have livestock, if you just have family pets, what's gone on with the property in those regards. Landscaping. You're going to talk about the exterior of the home, the yard. If you have a pool or a spa, you're going to talk about all that. What kind of repairs have been done? Is it a heated pool? Is it a heated spa? Is it a gas, electric? What? It's very, very detailed. Then you're going to talk about things. If you're like in a condominium or townhome, if you're in an HOA, there's a whole section of questions on that. And I can tell you from my experience, these are the questions that get kind of trip people up more often than not. Because it's like a 2-part thing. It starts out by saying condominiums and common interest, and people ignore the fact that living in an HOA is included in that. And the questions, they always put the HOA part at the very end of the question. So if you're just kind of going down this checklist of yes or no and explain why, a lot of people hit no, 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 and lo and behold, they're in an HOA. Like where I'm in the city of Rancho Santa Margarita, our entire city is in an HOA. And then there's other sub HOAs, depending on if you're in a different type of community within our city. So everyone should be checking yes and detailing out what that main HOA is at least. And if there's a sub HOA, you got to put that in there as well. But so many people just only read the first half of the question and they forget that. So then we have to go back through and make corrections and addendums and things like that. So just always when you're looking at your disclosures and filling them out, ask questions. You as the seller need to be the one who's actually physically filling it out. You cannot be having your agent, and I would never recommend an agent to do that. And the agent, you should not be sitting there asking the question and writing it, because now you've put your own liability at risk. Maybe you write it out wrong from what they told you down the road, and it comes back to bite you. So always make sure if you need to be there to help explain the question, but don't give them the words to put down, and don't physically write it for them or type it if you're doing it online. Your client needs to take care of it. You, the seller, need to take care of it. Next, there's a section about title and ownership and leads and legal claims. This is where you're going to disclose, like we talked about earlier. Did someone pass away and now it's in a trust, and you're trying to figure out who the trust is, who signs for the trust, or it's intestate, or there's a cloud on title from a lien or a mechanic's lien, or someone sued you. There's a judgment, an insurance claim judgment because someone got hurt and it's now going to get paid off. This is where you're going to disclose all that kind of stuff. Neighbors and neighborhood. People, this is probably a big one that people, I'm not going to say intentionally ignore, but it's a big one because it talks about it on there. Do you know if you're around any high voltage lines? Is there a nuisance from airplanes, trains, light rail, neighbors, barking dogs? It's got traffic congestion, any type of noise, right? You're supposed to hit yes or no, and then give your disclosure or your statement below if you hit yes. Any past or present disputes or issues with a neighbor that might impact the use of the property or enjoyment of the property. Yes or no? I think a lot of people sometimes maybe shy away from this one because they don't want anyone to think that, oh, we have bad neighbors or there's a lot of traffic. And quite honestly, everybody's threshold of enjoying property is different. You could live across the street from a school that's loud in the morning and loud in the afternoon, school when they're coming and going, and it doesn't bother you, but it may bother your buyer. So it's kind of a difficult one to really, I think, put down there, but I would go ahead and just put it, yep, it's there, but it doesn't bother us. Like, we live across the street from a school, yes, but it doesn't bother us. The noise doesn't bother us, right? You just make sure people know, they understand. They live by a park, you live by a school, you live by a busy intersection. Landfill is close by, trucks going, and if there's any smell from that, if it's bothered you, that's one. If it doesn't bother you, who's currently living there, that's one thing. But you still should need to disclose what you know about the property. Any governmental issues. So, has there been any? Are there any plants around, trees around that are protected? You need to disclose that, right? Because the buyer might be coming in going, "Ooh, I'm gonna blow up this whole backyard and redo it myself," and then you're like, nope, can't. We have trees back here that are now protected. We can't do anything with them. Any type of rent control in the neighborhood in case it's someone that's buying your house that wants to rent it out. Occupancy restrictions. This is the section where you're going to put those types of things in. That pretty much knocks that one out. So again, that's the SPQ, the seller property questionnaire. Now we'll talk about the TDS, the real estate transfer disclosure statement. Some of these questions sound the same, but I promise you they're not. On this one, this is where the seller is going to put down everything that comes with the property and things of that nature and how it comes. So you're going to check off, does it have a microwave? Does it have an oven? Does it have a garbage disposal, washer and dryer hookups? Does it have a washer and dryer? Water softener, patio. That's the whole first page, just checkboxing everything about it. Does it have a fireplace? Yes or no? Is it gas or electric? Exhaust fans? Yes or no? Because there's some requirements about these types of things, at least here in California. The walls, do you have interior walls, ceilings, any type of defects that you know about any of these things? Just driveways, sidewalk, fences, exterior walls, insulation, roof, plumbing. You're going to list any defects that you know of. This is not free to talk about where you remodeled and things like that. That is the SPQ. This is just going to let you know any known defects right now. And then there's a whole section of the seller. Are you aware of substances, materials, which may be environmental hazard? Yes or no on the property. Any settlement from any cause or slippage, sliding, or other soil problems, flooding, drainage, major damage to the property, CCNRs or other deed restrictions or obligations. This is another one that people always hit no, even when they live in an HOA and you've got CCNRs and deed restrictions automatically. Any lawsuits against the property. If you live in a condo, what we have here in Southern California a lot is we have a lot of condos and townhomes associations that have come under fire for the last 10, 12 years from manufacturer defects when they were built that the manufacturer didn't take care of, and now the warranty is expired, so the associations get sued by a big legal process. Anyway, that presents a cloud on title, and it makes it really hard for some buyers to buy these because banks don't want to finance them. Here's where you need to disclose that. Any type of issue with that, lawsuits against the seller or against the association. So that is going to be the transfer disclosure statement, all about title, what's going on with the property. That one's only 3 pages long. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about, this big one, is in California. It's called the Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. Again, I don't know if this is something that's used outside of California or not, but here this stems from like a lawsuit, I believe in the 90s, where an agent got sued, a broker got sued, or I believe it was the 90s this happened, got sued because something happened with the home. There was a defect with the home. It wasn't in the disclosure statement or the SPQ for the seller side, but also the agent and broker got sued because the buyer thought that it was something that any reasonable person could have visibly seen and let them know. And I can't remember all the circumstances around it, what it was, but it was something big and it was something very expensive to fix. And the courts determined that, yeah, anybody walking through the property should have noticed this. And you as the agent or you as a broker, California has determined, and I'm sure other states do this too, because you are the expert in your field, you are held to a higher standard than just the buyer who comes in and looks. Because that's how it used to be, buyer beware. You got to get your property inspection done. If you don't do an inspection, well, then you're taking a big risk. But now we have this agent visual inspection disclosure, and it kind of stems from this legal stuff that happened in the 90s. And it's now us as agents or brokers, whoever's representing the buyer and the seller, they both have to do it. Both sides have to do it here in California. We have to now go through and fill out a form of everything we see, room by room by room by room, that looks like it could be a defect. Now, for us at least, we are not expected to move any furniture, move any boxes. If it's not easily accessible and just visual by opening, like walking through a room, that's it. It's strictly visual. So it doesn't mean I open and close a door or open and close hinges on cabinets to see if anything's loose. Nope. That's not a visual inspection. That's an actual physical inspection when you're doing that, right? And we're not physical inspectors, we're just visual inspectors. So you're looking for like cracks on the floor, defects in the paint, defects in the flooring, fog on windows if it's got a blown seal. Sometimes the inspector will note that the window has a blown seal, but if I go walking by it and I don't see the actual fog, I might not note it because I don't see it. I'm not getting up. I don't have a tool to test these types of things that the inspector does. So I may or may not note the same things. You're going to go through each room by room, and just note the visual defects that you can see. Some agents get really, really detailed, and I don't blame them at all. I might even do the exact same thing because no house is perfect. Sometimes you get one back and it's just NA. They didn't see anything. I go through it and I see a lot of different little things because I'm just covering my butt, right? I'm not trying to make it harder on anybody else, but I want to make sure that I look like a reasonable person who walked through a home and noticed there's a crack in that wall, there's a crack in that door, there's a crack in that cabinet, there's a crack in that window, there's bad paint over here. So that's what the agent visual inspection is. So that is the three biggest disclosures that we have that convey from seller to buyer. And in the case of the Avid, both sides do it. Both the listing agent and the buyer's agent take care of. Now, like I said before, there are other disclosures that you're going to get. So a lot of them are boilerplate disclosures, like statewide buyer and seller disclosure here in advisory in California, water heater, lead-based paint. We have a new one now, the fire hardening defensible space, because of all the wildfires, where we actually have to go on as an agent and look to see if a property falls within a high burn area, and then what's the procedure for having that inspected. There's a lot of other little things, but the main ones that I've covered here, those three that I've covered, are the three biggies, and the three that really can cause the most challenges if they're not done correctly and they're not taken seriously. So again, disclose, disclose, disclose. I hope this helps. If you like what I'm doing, like and subscribe. Appreciate it. I try to update here once or twice a week. Doing some YouTube shorts now. It does seem to be getting a really good traction. And again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, drop it below. I'll get back to you. You can also always just direct message me direct. Go to my website and you'll see me on there. Take care.